Dollrune World of Magic is another entry in the 2014 Indie Game Maker contest, and much like Deadly Beauties, it leaves a lot to be desired. While the game isn't anywhere near as flawed as the previously mentioned game, it needs a lot of reworking on a lot of issues ranging from level design to difficulty. And the reworking of the game to be more challenging is paramount in my opinion, since as it stands, the final two boss battles are merely lengthy and boring rather than intense and challenging. But if you want a more detailed analysis of the game, then please stick around for a bit longer. Story-wise, the game is rather weak in my opinion. The game places so much focus on questing for various magical MacGuffins and what have you, that it forgets to spend any time on developing the characters. This makes one of the later scenes in the game where the only female party member dies rather pointless, since you don't care about her as a character. Almost all of her dialogue comes from her introduction and forceful entry into your party, and after that she is pretty much a silent protagonist that exists in the background. The death of a party character should be a pivotal moment in any game, but it only works if you feel a connection with the character that is now forever lost to you. Gameplay Dollrune is a rather standard turn-based RPG with random encounters. Sadly, the execution of this system feels highly flawed in this game for multiple reasons. One of the first is the game is highly lacking in difficulty once you get past the hour mark or so. After you've gotten to the Baron's Castle, you can grind out enemies that give you 5,000 gold pieces a pop. And since your wallet will quickly start to bulge from these encounters, you're liable to spend them on better equipment for your characters and a stockpile of HP and MP recovery items. As such, the game will cease to prove a challenge to the player as long as they keep up on their armor and weapon upgrades. Because of this, the bulk of your time spent playing this game feels like a boring and repetitive chore of go here and kill that. Another issue with the game, and arguably a cardinal sin for anyone that makes the game using RPG Maker, is the abundance of chests within the game. They are just everywhere within the game, ranging from half a dozen or so scattered around every town, and a dozen or more in almost every dungeon. But almost none of the chests contain anything of value. The bulk of them contain only a small handful of gold coins that are utterly useless to the player, since it's easy to obtain 100 times the amount in the chest by defeating a single enemy that's easy to find in many areas. Three somewhat smaller issues with the game before I move on to discussing the visuals is that the game has a random encounter rate that feels a bit on the high side at times, and that the game feels a bit lacking in terms of spells that buffer stats. And finally, the playable characters and equipment in this game all feel exchangeable, since all the playable characters have the same stats, and all the weapons on the same tier are identical in terms of stats as well. Broadly speaking, the game fares a bit better, but still suffers from a few issues. One of the most noticeable of these issues is that the playable characters appear on the combat screen. And while this normally wouldn't be an issue in most games, it is definitely a problem in this game, since the character sprites clash with the sprites of the enemies. Another issue along the same lines is that several of the enemies come from a different source, which only adds to the lack of visual consistency in the game. Outside of the consistency issues, the game does alright for itself for the most part in terms of the area layouts and what have you, as long as you ignore all of the treasure chests strewn throughout the world that just mar the game in my opinion. Sound-wise, the game is alright. None of the tracks truly stick out, but they never felt out of place or highly annoying to listen to either. Dollrune is a highly flawed game that is in desperate need of refining. As such, I just can't recommend this game in any capacity in its current state.